Okay.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning, or should we say Guten Morgen? We're extremely excited and delighted to be invited here today. And my name is, sorry, a bit nervous, the nervous bubbles, butterflies are flying around in there, no. But I'm really, really excited to be here today and share the findings of our study that we've done together. My name is Saoirse Reynolds.
And I'm Aidan Farrelly.
And I suppose before we begin this, I think it's really good to give you a context of who we are, who's standing in front of you today. Both myself and Aidan began as our journey as young people, like we all did, but we were participants of youth work, so we really experienced what it was like being a young person within a youth service, and obviously that experience was so positive that it made both of us then go on and volunteer and then become youth workers within youth services. And then from that then we went and studied youth work, and we're still continuing now for our journey on our studying, and we're now studying the doctoral. So we're halfway through that journey, so it's very exciting. But we will get there. So obviously, and now we teach. We're very privileged to be part of the Applied Social Studies Department within Maynooth University. So we also get the opportunity to teach youth work to students. So as you can tell, we eat, live and breathe youth work, and we're very passionate about it. And so that's just to kind of give you a flavour of who we are.
And so like Saoirse says, I suppose we've been immersed in this field of youth work practice in Ireland pretty much as long as we can remember, having been professional youth workers, now kind of stepping into the academic space a little bit, and we're very conscious of our bias, and certainly in research like this, but also our passion and using that to fuel where we want to go in terms of understanding more about youth work practice in Ireland. But before we kind of get to that research today, we'd like to just give you an idea of the context within which that youth work research for us has happened this summer. So Saoirse and I work in a university called Maynooth University, and we're part of a team in the Department of Applied Social Studies. And so you can see from our mission statement that there's a mission to promote human rights, social justice and equality. And that's a commitment in our department that isn't something that just sits on a shelf and isn't enacted. It's a live, living and breathing mission statement, and something that comes through all of our programs. And as you can see from the bottom, we're very proud this year, 40 years of youth work and community work graduates across our programs. I mean, we weren't even alive back when the first graduates finished. It's the university really of great tradition when it comes to youth work and community work teaching in Ireland, we believe. So some of those programs will be we have an undergraduate program, so we have a degree in community work and youth work, a master's program, which is a 2-year program, and then a doctoral program as well in social sciences. And those programs are of particular note in Ireland, in the Irish context, in that they're a dual endorsed program. So not only do you receive on completion your academic qualification in community work and youth work, but also, and very importantly, they are dual endorsed to professional qualifications. So whether that's with the NSETS program, which accredits youth work programs in Ireland, or AIEB, which is the community work standards, they also provide students with the opportunity to leave college with the academic qualification, but also, really important to that, is the professional qualification, and how that marries together in terms of our programs is really good. Also then, we as part of our department, we're one team, and we also have a department in ours which is social work, and then also social policy as well. So we have a real broad spectrum of programs that really look at some of those social issues which are important. I don't think we can come this morning and make any sort of bold claims about youth work practice. We're not going to do that. We want to. We might slip out one or two, because we have real passion. But I suppose to find a common understanding, we would all, I think, agree that youth work in Europe is a bit of a messy space to operate in, right? It's not clear-cut, it's not consistent. I couldn't go to a youth service in Germany and expect maybe the same type of experience as I would in Ireland or the UK or France. It's different. But we've just been speaking this morning, there is a commonality too in terms of the language that we use sometimes, also the purpose and the outcomes. But we really focus on the fact that it's a beautiful grey space. So I think we always call it's a grey area, or our colleague Hilary Tierney always says, it depends. And we tend to use that saying quite often in youth work. Well, we don't know. Let's see. It depends. It depends on the young people. It depends on the youth workers. It depends on the physical space. It depends on the money that we have. It depends on so many things. And I think for a lot of professional youth workers, you can either embrace that and call it a beautiful grey area, or you might like a little bit more systemic structure in your work. For us, and especially in the Irish context right now, in terms of youth work practice, youth work funding, you're still allowed that opportunity to be a little bit individual in your practice. And that's something I think that comes to the fore now over the next couple of slides in our research. We're quite lucky, I think, in Ireland as well, in that we have a Youth Work Act. So our state sets out its ideas about youth work. It sets out its mission about youth work also, where many other states might not necessarily have a definition of youth work enshrined in its legislature. We do. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. Is there flaws? Yes. Is it time to maybe amend, to change? We believe so. But it is what we have to work with now. And that's why we always try to include it, because I think it provides a nice landing space or a platform on which others can kind of understand where youth work occurs. So the Youth Work Act would suggest that it's a planned programme of education. And I think every word that I'd ask you to think about, every word is so important in this definition. A planned programme of education designed to aid and enhance the personal and social development of young persons. So the voluntary participation piece at the end is also, we believe, crucial and fundamental. That's something we certainly wouldn't take out. A lot of youth workers might suggest the beautiful grey space is actually in the unplanned sometimes, in the ad hoc or the responsive youth work practice, whereas the definition does stipulate the planned programme of education. It also goes on to say it must be complementary to one's formal academic experience. So it cannot replace school, it cannot replace college. It must be at another time. It can't substitute for that. But the education piece is crucial. So it's not just a service of receiving help or support. We must move from that, and I think that's why our definition of our department, our mission statement, still very much lives and breathes that commitment to social justice, the commitment to equality, because there's a process and there's a moving all the time in youth work practice. Now, we probably shouldn't have put UBU in here, because if Saoirse and I start talking about UBU, we tend to quite get very passionate about that. What UBU is a relatively new funding stream for youth work in Ireland. And after many, many years of a number of different funding streams from governments and from funders to fund our practice, what the government did is consolidate all of those funding streams into one, and that is the way in which professional youth work is operating in Ireland right now. We tend to have two main ones. Today we're focusing on UBU. We also have the Irish Youth Justice Service, which also funds youth justice work, but for today, UBU. And again, it's put in just in terms of the context of our students and preparing them through their professional qualification to enter that landscape of professional youth work. What are they entering into? Well, the government asks them to enter into a system of supporting marginalised and disadvantaged young people in the communities to overcome adverse circumstances. Now, I'd ask you to see, is there commonality between those two definitions, both from the government, both from the funders, technically? But we can already start to see where the grey areas come from, because there is something of a difference between what the Youth Work Act tells us the definition of youth work is and what the funders expect as the outcomes of the funds that they give, right? So that's just a little bit of a context, and I'll just hand over to Saoirse now to just start talking about the research.
Yeah, it's like, stop talking about UBU.
Yeah, because I'll get going.
Okay, so as we said earlier, we did a piece of research for today, and I suppose just to kind of give you the overall framework for the research, our philosophical worldview. Okay, I'm on it now. Our philosophical worldview was, and basically just to explain what that is, it's a basic set of ideas that kind of we put into action. So those basic set of ideas could be kind of defined as maybe constructivism. And by constructivism, constructivists believe that people construct or kind of construct or make their own knowledge by experiencing things. In this case, we were really interested in the experiences of students and how they construct the knowledge and how they build and learn on those experiences, basically. So this kind of philosophical worldview really kind of helped us create meaning and helped us to kind of capture the experiences. So that kind of framed our research, and kind of as we chose our design and our methodologies, this all kind of came back to this kind of this view. So I suppose our research design was very much based on mixed methods, and again, just to explain mixed methods for, and I'm sorry if you know this, by the way, I just kind of like to, say where we're coming from. But for mixed methods is when you combine qualitative and quantitative data, so it's about your data collection. So for the purpose of this, we used both because we found that there would be more validity within our research, and it was kind of a very natural fit to kind of our worldview. So with that in mind, we chose methods of a survey, an anonymous survey, which contained really open-ended questions throughout within the survey. And then we also did a focus group with the students. And I suppose our research was quite inductive in the sense that we started with the observation that like a lot of our students were participants of youth work like ourselves, and they then came on to study youth work. So we kind of started with that kind of observation, and we used the methodology then to kind of formulate our ideas and kind of give you kind of a general findings of what came back from that. And I suppose I think I covered. I think I ticked all the boxes there. So and it was supposed it's very it was a convergent mixed method approach in the sense that the survey and the focus group kind of happened around the same time, and then we put those findings together for a comprehensive analysis and the findings. So that's kind of it. So we kind of touched on it. We kind of gave you kind of an idea of who we are, and I suppose we are insider researchers. And to kind of just give you a flavour of what that means, it's basically the situationists. So our involvement within the context. So we were young people in youth work. We were students of youth work. We do teach youth work. So we have a lot of involvement of the participants of our study, so when we conducted this research, we worked with people who had similar experiences as ourselves. So we, for a lot of the time, we did share identity, we shared the common youth work language, and we kind of had that kind of connection already with the students. So that kind of gave us a lot of legitimacy, and it also kind of helped us basically get acceptance from the students. They really opened up to us. They really shared their knowledge with us. But then there also is that stigma. So we do want to acknowledge, like kind of Aidan touched on earlier, there is a bias. There is a stigma when you're an insider researcher, because we can have we can sway it in the way that we want it to be swayed. Like, let's be honest. But we felt it was really important for this research to kind of acknowledge that it is actually a positive, and it was a benefit to our study that we were insiders, because the openness of the participants, and we gathered so much really rich data that I can't wait to share with you. But we do kind of want to acknowledge that there's no simple or neutral value position-free research, and it's all influenced by values, and kind of we've touched on it already earlier, but we're very proud of our values and our principles, and as youth workers, we do believe in social justice, we do believe in equality, we do believe in voluntary participation, we do believe in the power of young people voicing their opinion, and we make absolutely no apologies for that, so that is there, but we were aware of that, and we have been, through reflective practice, we've been really careful and conscious throughout the research that doesn't come true, in the sense that we kept the questions very open-ended, and we let the surveys and the focus groups, we listened and we took in all those experiences, we didn't guide them. So our wonderful research participants, that, to be honest, I wish they were here today, because I think they would have described this research a lot better than we would. But currently they're current students of Maynooth, And the main criteria for these students was that they had to have been a young participant within youth work for them to take part. And that was it. So if they were a young person and now they're studying youth and community, then they were welcome to take part in this study. Again, we were interested in how, come back to your kind of constructivism worldview, that kind of helped us then kind of construct their sense of their belonging and their identity through them talking about their experiences and reflecting on those experiences. So we kind of used that to kind of get a handle of that one. And then we were really curious about the kind of the set of practices that they now use now within their youth work and how they link that to their experiences and their conceptions. And we really were curious and we really wanted them to share their insights into the role of youth work in developing young people's identity and belonging. So it was that full cycle of them being a young person, studying, and now giving it back. So it's kind of, we were interested in that experience, that knowledge, that learning, because with constructivism, basically your knowledge is like the foundation. So you have the foundation and then you're building on that with your experience and you're reflecting. So that's what we were trying to capture when we were talking to students. Yeah, okay, so I suppose just belonging, it's important to kind of say from a youth studies literature, it's primarily understood in terms of representation and identity. So within youth studies literature, there is an emphasis to explore belonging as a set of practices. It's negotiate the quality of belonging. It's kind of situate in nature, so where does it sit within various contexts? And it's relational in nature, so how does it relate to others? And then belonging would tie to everyday experiences and collective experiences, which have been linked to place, constructors of status and sense making. So again, we're asking students to tell us about their youth workplace, to tell us about how youth workers influenced them, how did it help them with their sense making. And then all of that then is negotiated through conceptions of their values, respect and authenticity, like basically their reality. And when you have that all in place, it allows you then to question your belonging and construct your own identity, if that makes sense. So that's kind of, that was kind of our approach. And then at the same time, we're very aware that the youth work process was kind of happening throughout our research as we kind of went on. And I'm not sure if you've read her, but Kerry Young, it's one of my favourite little red books. It's a really short read, but it's really well recommended. So she kind of describes youth work process as a reflective exercise, where young people are learning from their experience and they're critically thinking, they're engaging with sense making, and they're kind of, it's all going towards them forming their identity. So kind of through that reflective exercise, through learning from experience and through thinking critically and sense making, that self-discovery, young people then form their identity. And it's not an insular activity. So kind of like what Aidan was describing earlier, like youth work is huge. Like it kind of, it doesn't just happen in one place or another. It doesn't just happen as an individual. It kind of happens through your own agency, but also through your interaction with others. And that's what she kind of says then for youth workers, is that your interaction with those young people is really important, and that the art of youth work is to make those relationships. And we can't emphasize how much relationships came up through the findings, which we'll go to now in a bit, but that was a constant theme for our participants, was the relationships, and how important it was to make and sustain really valuable relationships. And those relationships have to be based on honesty, trust, and it's a two-way thing, like with young people, and it happens through conversations. It happens through youth workers. It can happen on the bus. It can happen walking down the street. It can happen, it doesn't have to be a physical space, is what kept coming up. Like youth work can happen everywhere if the right ingredients are in place, and we firmly believe in that kind of reflective exercise through conversations can happen, and as a result of these conversations then young people or even youth workers then can kind of organise their experiences and their knowledge and their transactions with the world. So yeah, so
okay.
I'm finished for now.
So we've done the context, okay? Hopefully now you're with us and you understand where we were coming from, where the students were coming from, where the department was coming from, right? And we've kind of discussed a little bit about the youth work landscape in which we're doing this. So what did we want to find out? We asked students a multitude of questions. They asked themselves a multitude of questions. And I kept smiling when Saoirse was talking because I'm getting flashbacks of the focus group that we had and the privileged opportunity that we had to hear from students, because, like we said, we're starting to see a lot of youth work participants now wanting to become youth workers. And we're trying to just get a bit of a handle on why is that? What is it about that youth work relationship, let's say, that encourages young people to then want to go and be the youth worker, right? So we've asked, do you believe your involvement in youth work service has contributed to your development of belonging and identity? Why would you choose to study youth work? And we brought our values and our biases, and we said that, why would you choose to study youth work in such a messy, grey landscape? What is it? What's the golden nuggets of value or love or passion that you're finding out of that? What are elements of your experience as a student in the programs are contributing to that development of a professional identity as a youth worker? And then we kind of threw in a little one at the end just to try and get a bit more when we're speaking about a definition of youth work that maybe is a little bit old, a little bit stale, and speaking of an idea of trying to update that or to see if that can evolve. We asked for the students to give us how they would define youth work in Ireland. And we've got some really interesting findings. So, key findings. There are 3. Like Saoirse said, it's probably still a little bit of a live piece of research. We did this over the summer for this workshop today. But I can really assure you this has started a bit of a conversation in our department in terms of what's next, because it's very hard when we start to understand what our students are saying to just finish that at a full stop. I think this is an evolution a little bit for us also in terms of what is important from the youth work participants who are now students of youth work, what mattered to them as a young person and now as a student. I don't think it'll come to anybody as a surprise that key finding number 1 in terms of youth work was that relationship, and how important those research participants spoke of that relationship being authentic, being sincere, being reciprocal. In order for a relationship, the power had to be analysed and determined to be of somewhat equal value. That was key finding number 1. It came up again and again and again. That relationship between a young person and a youth worker is powerful. Also, the second one then is the space. Every time we ask someone, it was number 1, a safe space. To have a safe space. To be in a safe space that's non-judgmental, that doesn't ridicule me for how I think or how I believe, or I can ask questions safely. Again, not the physical space, but the space in which the youth work relationship dynamic can play out was really important. But then number 3 also, that we need integrated practitioners. So back to what I spoke about being a dual endorsed program, students told us that that is critical, that not only are they coming to college to learn the academic elements of youth work and community work, but having such a weight on the professional side, whether it's work placement, whether it's opportunities to be reflective, that it's not like this, it's not top-down thought, it's very much in circular discussion form. Those values are really, really important to the participants that took part in this. One piece that stands out to me was a participant said, someone just took a chance on me. And where I'm from, no one takes a chance on you. That person took a chance on me, said they believed in me, and that encouraged me then to become a youth worker. I mean, that youth worker, in my opinion, could retire on that success alone. Because they're not doing it for the money anyway. So no. They could, talk about impact. We have this conversation about youth work and the impact youth work has. For a student, a young student, to be able to reflect and say, that person just had a bit of faith in me, and that's what motivated me and drove me to do what I want to do, is huge, because as Fusco says, it encouraged that young person to break that cycle of oppression. We all understand that there are pockets of deprivation or disadvantage or areas where going to second level education is not the norm. Never mind third level education. Never mind a career now. And youth workers are playing a pivotal role in Ireland in going, hang on a second. We're all to be at this table. And that was a huge finding from us. Knowing that the youth worker in that relationship has my best interest at heart. There's no agenda. There's no outcomes that are predetermined other than by what the young person wants. So yes, we have the UBU at the start saying you must target disadvantage, you must target this. We have the Youth Work Act saying it must be planned, it must be education. But we're clever as youth workers in Ireland. We go, yeah, that's no problem, we'll do that. But then we walk into the grey space. And that grey space allows us to do it in a way that we also make sure that the interests of the young people that we're working with are the number one priority. We spoke about this on our 14th train journey yesterday coming here, that a word courage isn't something that we've heard too much of in youth work literature. We've seen it in parts, but not to the extent that this research participant spoke about. That it takes a level of courage in the youth work relationship to divest some of your own personal information or to give of yourself. If the relationship is to be authentic, to be sincere, to be meaningful, it can't just be one way, right? It can't just be expecting the young person to give all. That requires the youth worker to also take that leap a little bit. And it's when that leap occurs, according to our research participants, that is where the real value comes from that relationship. But they don't all work out. There are some young people, when I was a youth worker for 15, 16 years, that just did not like me. I mightn't have liked them either. But that's life, right? That's human interaction. But instead of pushing through, and instead of trying, having that acknowledgement and ability to reflect in our practice that says, not me. There's a better youth worker for you. There's a more meaningful relationship somewhere for you. That was important as well. Some of our participants spoke of negative interactions with youth workers. Maybe youth workers who gave information that wasn't factually correct, or that was value-based, or that was maybe not with that young person's primary interest at heart. And that can actually be quite detrimental also. So it's to acknowledge that it's not all rosy, right? It's not all perfect. We have to be constantly aware of the attitudes, the values, and the openness. One of our students said, you don't have to be a youth worker that knows everything. You just have to be a youth worker that's willing to say, I don't know, but let's find out.
Okay, so we've kind of touched on this already, but I suppose when we're talking about the space, it's not the physical space. It's the space that's created by the youth worker and the young person together. And we've kind of talked about how, you know, the students acknowledge the critical thinking. And what was really interesting as well is they kind of acknowledged that the space of the college and how that created a space that was a real safe space again, and that encouraged reflective thinking and on their praxis. So they were, you know, so that space of kind of being within a youth centre then continued in a way into their college experience. So they kind of put that down to the department, kind of creating a similar safe space for them to explore and learn new things and to build on those experiences that they had as participants. So be it a bad experience, okay, why was that a bad experience? Like, how can we how can we ensure that won't happen again for another young person? Like, so so they kind of talked about how youth workers, they're always keen to learn, they're keen to share, they're keen, that process of issue and exploring ideas with young people is really important. And that they felt it was the youth workers' responsibility to make that space, essentially. And then it was the university's responsibility to ensure they had the knowledge on how to create that safe space. So again, we complemented each other. So it's covered that. And I suppose I know, like, my years as a youth worker, like, the best type of space I used to have with young people would have been on the bus or just walking to the shop to buy food for cooking later or whatever. So it's basically it's the creating of those conditions and making the safety and free from judgment. Again, we've kind of touched on it, so I won't repeat it. But it's an empowering space. Mm-hmm. It's a space where young people are really empowered and, like, meaningfully empowered. Not just a tick box, I did this. And then I suppose what kept reoccurring within the research was that they were comparing the space to other spaces that young people occupied. So they compared it to home, they compared it to school, they compared it to the local park, they compared it to the cinema. So they compared it to different spaces where young people are welcome, but they're not welcome in the same way. And so we were kind of getting from them why that was. And they felt it wasn't a place where you were all the time respected or you were treated as an equal. And that's what made youth workspaces so unique, was how they were treated and how the values and principles that were there. And then, yeah, so I suppose this quote here, when you engage in conversations and people treat you with respect, it definitely gives you a sense of belonging. And kind of just to bring it back to why we're here today. Like, why are we here today? We're talking about where young people feel they belong and how they're forming their identity. Youth workspace gave them the opportunity to do just that. They went to a space where they were felt equal, where they felt it was safe, and they got to explore who they were. They got to explore their own identities, and they felt like they belonged to something. And I'm always saying, like, I feel like I remember that eureka moment, because what I didn't give you in my background, I actually did graphic design in my as one of my degrees, and it just didn't really fit fully when I went into the commercial side of graphic design. It just didn't fit right. And then I remember going to that interview for my place on the Masters and continuing the volunteering, and then something was just like a eureka moment. And that first day in class, I went, oh my God, I found my tribe. And I feel like we're very unique. We're a very unique youth work tribe of wonderful people who think amazing, and sometimes when we're outside of this space, this safe space where we're youth workers, we can be seen as really weird, in the sense of, like, why do you value young people's opinions? Why are you listening actively to them? Like, we're the adults here, we know more than they do, but that's not the case, and we believe that, and we know that, like, young people have so much to offer, and by creating the space today, it's really positive and it's really exciting, and I can't wait to get into the space and not be standing here blubbering and messing up my words, to discuss it more with you guys. So it's kind of that importance then now. So we kind of went from creating safe spaces for students, and now we're kind of, you know, as academics, we're kind of entering another space so that we now create space in literature, because there is a paucity of academic literature when it comes to youth work, and they are there is loads of different interpretations when you hear the word youth work, and I suppose there's a lot of responsibility now on us to kind of carry forward what our students in Ireland and our youth workers are kind of describing their work, and how do we capture that so the likes of the funding doesn't dictate our work, you know, because it is slowly changing, but that's a whole different conversation, sorry, but it's just very interesting. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, I'll stop. And the last finding.
Yes, and the last one kind of hopefully comes a little bit full circle back to, so we've asked our research participants what was it about youth work that really encouraged them when it comes to identity and belonging, to the point where they wanted to become youth workers. And they've spoken about the relationship, and they've spoken about the space. But having experienced that, what is it about then the professional programme that students believe is preparing them to go out into the youth work sector and to live that? And it was really interesting because we've had so many discussions based on these findings in our department where the pedagogical approach almost mirrors youth work practice in a way. Not every facet of it, don't get me wrong, but the way in which we teach, the way in which we learn, the way in which we challenge each other and we talk through, and there's an acknowledgement that there's always so much knowledge in the room. And what students have said back to us is what that does is, having been on campus and experiencing that, when we go on work placement, when we go and finish and work in youth work services, we're so accustomed to that space being facilitated and facilitating others that it's a huge opportunity for them to kind of hit the ground running in youth work services, because it's where they've learnt youth work practice. They get the theory and the academics, but they also get to relate that, and that praxis piece is something that just came back quite often from students, is the ability to digest the academia, but relate that to the practice. Again, a research participant kind of spoke about it. I don't even think she realised the power in what she said until she said it, where
as a young person, you just know youth work works. Like, youth work, it is what it is. And it was also an acceptance on her part that youth work, it's grand, it works for me. I get all this. And it was as if everyone should know youth work works. But they don't, right? Because everyone doesn't get to experience it. But what college does for her is it connects the dots. So we know that youth work works, then we go and we get to understand why it works, how it works. And that's like your toolkit, right, as a practitioner, because then you're bringing that with you into that grey space, into that area where you can facilitate the youth work relationship to happen. Placement is key for us. So we only get to see our students pretty much half the year, maybe a little bit more than half of an academic year, because they spend the rest of that time in youth work organisations, in community work organisations. So it was consistently important from research participants that the opportunity to bring our learning to placement, it changed people's perspectives. It brought the words on paper into real life. It went from a hypothetical situation to a real life situation. And again, that was just consistent over the course of our research. And there's an analogy that someone said where lecturers don't spoon feed us. They don't spoon feed us the information and hope that we eat it, but actually they just give us the spoon. And then we as a class group almost have figured out how do we feed ourselves. And it's quite empowering, again, thinking about a pedagogical approach where the class cohort quite often are working together towards an outcome as opposed to just listening to input. That idea that it's really kind of practical and in our top programs is just quite important.
Okay, so I suppose we touched on it. We did ask then students to define youth work, so we didn't want to just assume that we knew what youth work was. So this is some of the stuff that youth work students said. So they said youth work is a practice to give all young people a sense of belonging by encouraging them to be themselves and express themselves in order to promote equality within and outside of the youth service. And again, it says, like, Devlin and Gunning said that it's young people value youth work for a number of reasons: to socialise, to participate in new opportunities, to learn in non-formal ways, or to develop positive relationships. And that reoccurred. That's just a nicer way of summing up what everybody kept saying, that for them it was a place to meet their friends, it was a place to learn new things about themselves, to challenge themselves in a really safe way, and they built up some of their best relationships. And then I suppose this is just another one. So youth work is a practice that empowers young people by providing a safe, inclusive and fun environment in order to develop their sense of identity and give them the tools to excel in life. So that toolkit that Aidan's talking about, it's getting heavier. And where we are repeating ourselves quite a bit, but you can see it's kind of a reoccurring thing that kept coming up throughout the research. And it's a practice that promotes self-discovery by building relationships in order to create an environment where healthy challenging can occur in order to empower the young person to grow in a way that is social, confident and true to themselves. So you can, if you were there in the room, you feel so empowered yourself, and you're hearing the wonderful effect that youth work had on their lives and why they're there studying it. And I suppose just to kind of, we've given you all these findings. We've told you about our methodology. We've kind of filled you in on the process, our research framework. We've kind of given you the key findings of that research. But now we kind of want to give something back to you guys and to do, not a lot of homework, but just as youth workers. Kate Sappin talks about locating self, and I'm not sure if you've heard of this kind of, but she would say that as youth workers, we need to have clear self-awareness and to support the development of our professional practice and the relationships we build. And she would encourage youth workers to locate their self by identifying and evaluating their own experiences, their own strengths, their own weaknesses, their own gaps in their profession. She'd ask you to look at your own identity. How do you identify yourself? Like, what is your perceptions of others? How are they perceived? What is your role? What is your status? What are your values? What are your principles? Where's your position of power? Like, where are you? So kind of really kind of locate yourself. Like, where are you as a youth worker in the lives, in that space while building relationships with young people? Like, locate yourself, like own who you are, but know who you are. and all the whilst maintaining those professional boundaries. She's not saying go in there and tell them everything. She's saying, like, in a professional relationship, kind of maintain those professional boundaries in order to ensure that safe space for young people. So it's kind of going back again. But kind of back to Aidan's example of that, not having that connection with certain young people, or young people, for us, it's really important. Youth work is a voluntary participation. So when young people don't want to be there, let them go. You don't need to hold them. Like, youth work is their space. So if they don't want to come to the space, that's okay. And I suppose that sometimes is harder for the young youth worker than it is for the young person to kind of, respect their choice to participate or not. So it's just something for us all to kind of think of when we go into the field, to kind of locate yourself within that. And I suppose you can apply that, Jen, as well to even, a lot of you guys are writing policies, or like locate yourself within that policy when you're writing about youth work. Like, where are you? What is your personal stance, or what way are you feeling when you're writing about youth work? Like, and we're at the end. No.
And again, just to thank everybody for your time and listening to us have to reminisce really about what was actually a really enjoyable research process for us over the summer. It was an opportunity for us to speak with research participants in a different way than we as young new researchers, I suppose, haven't had too many opportunities to do before. So we're here before you feeling very privileged to have had that opportunity to not put a full stop in a debate, but actually maybe just to start a conversation about something. I don't think it's possible this morning to draw any definitive conclusions about why the youth work students that we researched with as young people, what drove them. But some themes were quite consistent, and that matters, I think, and that's something that we can really take forward to our own teaching, I think, and to also consider as many more, hopefully, young people engaged in youth services continue to aspire to be youth workers. I think this will add a little bit to that conversation, a bit of understanding for us as educators in terms of why are they in the room, while also continuing to ask, why are we in the room?
Yeah.
You know? We'd really love some questions, but again, just to thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Emil. And like we said, we hope we did our students proud in presenting what they wanted to say, because again, we are aware that we are interpreting what they have said. So we are trying to find meaning in their experiences. So we're very aware of that. So we hope we did them somewhat justice, and wish we could share all their, because there's reams of transcripts and there's loads of information. So yeah. But thank you, and thanks for all the friendly smiles and nods, because I was nervous. I don't know if you can tell. So yeah, any questions? Oh, thanks.